Hi everybody, welcome back to the Jamesay Wamesay Show. This is actually like my fourth or fifth attempt at videotaping this, but I get so tongue-tied at certain times, and I figure I would just like start over, and whatever happens, happens. I'm gonna fumble over my words. It's just part of my, my post-recovery situation, so we'll just deal with it. Now, the very first thing I want to talk about is Steve Peters and Bianca ALU-MARR's comic verse. Comic verse is a comic book. You can actually read it online as a web comic, but the actual published version is coming out like on Kickstarter. They actually had a successful campaign this week. They were stuck at like $750 somewhere in there. They were stuck on that number for a good week or so, and nobody like did anything. Then all of a sudden, word of mouth got out, traction picked up, and all of a sudden, in about 3 days, they got over $1,000 in donations. But that's pretty awesome. I want to congratulate to Steve and Bianca, and I want to say thank you to everybody who contributed. Now, one of the things that I promised was all you have to do is message me, and I will hook you up with a free commission for any character in the comic verse. If you're a reader, just send me a picture of the character you want and his name, and I'll take care of that. And that'll be in your mailbox before you know it. So once again, congratulations, guys! You guys did it, and that's no easy feat. All right, now second, I'm going to talk about my Kickstarter. I'm actually going to push my Kickstarter back a couple of weeks. The reason I want to do that is because that's when I'm gonna have my big show at the Hershey Comic Con. That's July 10th through the 12th, I believe. I'm almost positive of that. But I figure it'd be cool to have the campaign running when I'm actually meeting people. Whether or not it'll be successful or not, I don't know. But it doesn't hurt to have it going while you have a show going, right? Okay, now on with the show. First thing I want to show you the latest issue of the Papa Balloon. And of course, there's the Quinn Rowan Dex back cover. Check her out once again. Put the link in the description. Now, I actually have this copy open because this is one of the copies that was misplaced, and some of the copies were covered in leaves. I'm sorry to Missy. I'm not going to be sending any leaves to Canada. I don't want to create an international incident after all. But I figured I'd show off the interiors of the issue while I have this open. I'll be bagging and boarding the issues that weren't damaged. And I'm giving away the ones that were damaged. I think they're all spoken for at this point. Thanks to everybody who reached out to me and asked for a copy. All right, now here's page one. All right, and it says Building 7, authorized personnel only. Oh. All right. Then it just jumps to another area. This is actually, I believe, lower in the bowels of that same building. But that guy does not become relevant until the end of the issue. All right, it says the basement, and the cactus is saying shiver. And in the penthouse suite, we have Papa Balloon, of course. And his alarm clock is saying, rise and shine, my lord. And he says on the next page, would you like me to prepare your armor, my king? And he yawns. And he says, as I've said before, a god does not need armor. So, apparently, Papa Balloon is a god. I knew that, but I haven't revealed that. And I've known that for several issues. Oh, sorry, guys. All right, here's the next spread of pages. Right, let's see what they're saying on these pages. All right, the balloon is saying Fred, and he's saying yes, Ether. That's actually the balloon's name is Ether. That's the name of the god of air. I actually did some quick Wikipedia research to look up who the god of air really is. And also, here's the kind of armor that the other balloons wear, and Papa Balloon refuses to wear because of his godlike status. And he says, "There's something bothering you, isn't there?" That's what Papa Balloon says. "You've known me for centuries. Please speak your mind." And the other balloon says, "Ether?" And the balloon says, "Lord Ether." He says, "Lord Ether. I've been in contact with Building 7 maintenance. It seems power is failing." And we have that guy from the first page at the very top over here. Do you guys see that? I went the wrong direction because of the camera. All right, he says, "That's a maintenance issue for people beneath your standards. Your, oh, sorry, our statuses. I'm sorry, guys, I have glaucoma. Check out the glasses. See how thick they are? I don't even know my own words that I wrote." And the other guy objects, "But Building 7, and he says, "But nothing. Perhaps I was lost in a haze of amnesia for far too long if you handled such mundanity in my stead." Well, I figured that's a good enough preview for you guys to pick up on what the vibes of the new issue are. So I'm going to throw that aside, and I'm going to move on. These are actually comic books that I've worked on that have absolutely nothing to do with Papa Balloon and Cactus. Now, first we have Horror Comics Leprechauns. This is nothing but horror stories about leprechauns. And I drew one story in there, and this was published by ANTARCTIC Press. So this is actually my first real pro job, besides my self-published work. Those are the same people that do the Ninja High School. That was a big series, and they did Gold Diggers, which was Fred Perry, who is tied with Dave Sim for having the longest comic series of all time, which is 300 issues with one artist, and that's quite an accomplishment. Someday, Eric Larson, God willing, will reach that goal. I think he's at about 270, 271, somewhere in that area. So he's just 19 comics off of that tying that record, which is a great accomplishment. It took Dave 26 years to do so, and that's pretty awesome. Now, they chose to lead with my art and my story, which I did with the help of somebody. I forget who the writer was at this point. Let's see. Here, I'll pause that while I open the issue. Okay, I'm back. It was written by a Jay Hewer. Now, let me just turn to page 1 so you can see what I did there. Here we go. Now, I couldn't have done this without Ben Ferrari, who's been really great with me and with all of my non-Papa Balloon stuff. And he created, along with Kurt Belger, this series, which is Kanin the Marauder. Check that out. That's a really great cover. All right, now here's the logo for their company. Check that out. Nice little Zeppelin there. And here, this cover is actually by Kurt. He is the regular artist, I believe, on the series, which is pretty awesome. I've actually known Kurt for almost 20 years. I used to know him back in DeviantArt. We were kind of friends from a distance, you know. This is our first time actually working together, and it's been a very good experience. Right, here's another one. I'm not sure who this cover's by, actually. But it's cool. I like the balloons at the top. You knew I would, right? All right, and then here is actually my cover to the series. There you go, Kanin the Marauder. Look up close because it's all about me, right? Woohoo! Alright, now here is my first interior page. Like I said, this was actually written by Kurt. He drew the very first panel because the rest of the book, or the rest of my story, is a hallucinogenic trip. So it doesn't really affect the continuity. So I thought it was a good idea to have him do the first panel to tie it into the reality, and then basically I went all out drawing kind of like a Marvel style, where I would basically just draw the panels and everything, and basically hand it off to Kurt and have him do all the word balloons basically. But there was some collaboration on the plot, which was really awesome, and I want to say a big thank you to him. I'm going to show you the cover again. Remember Kanin the Marauder. They have a Kickstarter right now. I believe there's a 4-issue collection that they're going to be putting out, a nice little trade paperback. So support them and give them some love. All right. The next thing I'm going to show is I picked out some random comics. Like I just grabbed them and I figured, hey, if I like them, let's put them on display. So first thing I got was Egomania. Now this is Eddie Campbell's follow-up to Bacchus, and it only lasted 2 issues. I believe this is the second issue. Yeah, the first issue has a self-portrait of Eddie on it. Now this is awesome because it has a great long Alan Moore interview. As you may know, I'm an Alan Moore fan. I think he's great, despite how the people kind of tear him down these days, and he kind of tears them down in reverse. So I kind of understand both sides of things. But let's see what else is on here. Well, that's a pretty long interview. I'm on page 18 and it's still the interview. Page 24, still the interview. So I'm guessing this issue is pretty much all Alan Moore interview. Now, the issue before, there was a thing about a painting by Lefevre that's in Australia, sitting in a bar. It's worth millions of dollars. It's behind glass. Nobody knows it's valuable, but Eddie knew what it was, and he knew the backstory of the painting, and he wrote extensively on it. And he also does a little bit of a series he never finished on the history of humor. So if you want some Eddie Campbell stuff that you've never really gotten to see anywhere, that I personally never seen reprinted anywhere else, check out Egomania. I'm sure the eBay will have issues for you. All right, another one I bought was a comic I've never even opened or looked at, and that's Avengers. This is 61. So I think this is my oldest Marvel comic. I'm pretty sure. I had an older comic, but it turned out to just be the cover. It was from the 1940s, but I paid $5 for it, and it was in bad shape. But I didn't notice it was in such bad shape that it was just the cover. So that's on me. But yeah, that's a cool cover. I think that's Gene Colan. I'm gonna leave that to you guys who are more of the experts on that kind of thing. You probably know exactly who drew this cover. All right, and that's it for those issues there. Now I'm going to show you some of my larger works that I'm not going to be bringing to the convention because they're just too cumbersome, too large. These are 14 inches tall. And here's Two-Face. Let me get in close. You're going to see the details on his face there. You can kind of tell it is inspired by the Bruce Timm version of Two-Face, but it's definitely my own thing as well. Like the damaged side of his face is all me, really. And the hair, like who does hair like that, right? Then I was on a kick with Batman side villains and everything, and then I did a Penguin. I think that's the order I did them in, but I can't remember for sure. But yeah, there was a ton of cross hatching in this, but I had a lot of fun doing it, and I like to just capture these things in my own way. I don't really have a favorite Batman artist. In fact, I'm really kind of sick of Batman. I could go the rest of my life and never read another Batman comic again, except maybe the 1950s stuff, which I think is always appealing. And I love the innocence of those early books and how fun those stories are. Same with Superman. The only Superman for me has always been the 1950s Superman and 60s, whatever, you know. Just the stuff that was more fun. I like Neil Adams, obviously, but I think he brought too much realism to comics, and everybody followed his example. All right, next we have a colored Joker. Here we go. I had recently gotten a watercolor set, and I decided to try it on a Joker. I don't usually work this large, but I found that ever since I went digital, working this size actually kind of suits me. All right, then I have another Joker, but this one is in black and white. Now this one is actually spoken to. This is actually Quinn's copy. I just haven't sent it to her yet, but that's going to be hers. That one was pretty popular. I think it blew up on Reddit. I always blow up on Reddit as opposed to on Facebook lately. Then this one got a lot of hate. This was the Ultimate Warrior. Like they really hated the way I did his mouth there. That's how I do a lot of mouths these days. But I think they're wrestling fans want realism. I think they don't like my symbolism and experimentation. But what are you gonna do? All right, that's all the artwork I have. Now let me show you some other artwork. This is actually an original painting by Dave Sim. He painted this on the sketch cover of his own sketchbook that he had given. He had not really given. He had sold it like on his Kickstarters. Well, here, let me get up close here so you can see the detail. This was, I think, before he was doing like any artwork, like since his wrist gave out. And it's one of my favorite pieces. I really love that piece, and he gifted that to me, like sight unseen. I didn't even know he was going to do that, and it really meant a lot to me. And once again, thank you, Dave. That's really awesome of you. Next, we have Tough Stuff. Now, this is by my friend Kevin Delgado, who's done a ton of covers. I know he did a cover for Exquisite Corpse. He did a Dick Tracy cover. I think he might have done multiple Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles covers. Here, let me hold the book up again. Here you go. Now, this is about kind of like a cat hitman kind of character. It's like really fun stuff, really creative. Here's some interior art for you. Yeah, check him out. I mean, I'm actually going to see him in Philadelphia at the end of next week on Sunday, the 31st. So yeah, we're both going to be at the Philly Fan Expo. All right. Now this is Al Davison. Now this book is a collection of his comics. Now he was born paralyzed, and he never saw the ocean, and yet he had dreams about the ocean, and I think that really blew his mind as he was growing up. His legs are pretty much like twisted and mangled and everything, but he has really interesting stuff. Check him out. Now I know he's done some X-Files comics, and there's some mainstream stuff, but everything I've read by him has been underground stuff, and I think he's just a really fantastic and interesting person. I remember I had another one of his books, but I gave it to my friend Emily, and that book, he actually had a section of blind drawings. He had gone blind for a few weeks, and he kept doing his sketch journal. So that's the kind of thing I can really get behind. That's really cool, and I recommend that book. And that's kind of it. But I also have one last book, and this is Hot Tips from the Comics Creators. And this is one of the ugliest covers I've ever seen on any book, be it a comic book or related to comic books or even real books. That's just really terrible. But this book is full of quotes from creators that were featured in Comics Interview Magazine, which was David Anthony Kraft's magazine, okay? And I figured, from now on, I'll just randomly read a section from some famous comic book artist. and I settled on Chris Bachalo, and this chapter is called The Art of Comics, and it says Chris Bachalo. I made a promise to myself that when I got into comics, I was going to do what I was interested in. I wasn't going to follow anybody else's style. I was always going to do my style and tell the story the way I wanted to tell it. I'm going to do the characters the way I thought they should be. Well, what do you guys think of that? I think that's a pretty interesting quote. I think that's something I subscribe to. Although I've worked very little with other people, and I have really no interest in following in his footsteps and getting into the mainstream thing. But if you really follow his career, he really always did what he wanted to do. Once people really liked his Vertigo stuff, you know, he totally changed his style to like a Bigfoot style for the X-Men, and I don't think that was like met with a lot of excitement by a certain demographic of the industry. But I always like that, and I think that he'll always follow his heart and do his own thing, and I can always respect that. And that's pretty much it. I just want to say thank you to everybody, and congratulations once again to Steve and Bianca, and I'll see you next time on Jamesay Wamesay. Peace.